My friend Brian Sams and my producer Luke Clayton host a podcast entitled the Church Advance Podcast. I highly recommend that you check them out and benefit from their ministry to church leaders and the church at large. Again, that's the Church Advance Podcast, hosted by Brian Sams and Luke Clayton. I hope you'll give them a listen. This is the On Preaching Podcast with H.B. Charles Jr., the podcast dedicated to helping you preach faithfully, clearly, and better. Good day, friends. I want to start this episode of the podcast by inviting you to the Cutting It Straight Expository Preaching Conference that will take place September 23rd through the 25th here in Jacksonville, Florida, at the Shiloh Metropolitan Baptist Church, where I am privileged to serve as pastor teacher. I am grateful and thankful for this opportunity the conference provides us to train, model, and promote faithful biblical preaching and teaching. This is an encouraging event that will feature, first of all, models of Bible exposition. We're grateful for the guests that will be with us to speak. Likewise, there will be lectures on the principles of exposition and hands-on workshops to help you flesh out the process of sermon preparation and sermon delivery. We're grateful and thankful for the Cutting It Straight conference and the contribution it has made to not just senior pastors, but associate ministers, Bible teachers, etc. We believe everybody should cut it straight. You can register for Cutting It Straight 2025 at cutstraight.org or hbcharlesjr.com. I hope you'll join us September 23rd through 25th for Cutting It Straight. In this episode of the podcast, I want to talk to you about something that I have discussed before in an earlier version in some form, but I want to address it again. I want to talk to you about my sermon preparation documents. So, I think you should have a system for sermon preparation. And whatever your process is for getting from text to sermon should involve three elements. You should read widely as you can. You need to record diligently, and you need to reflect prayerfully. Read, record, reflect. Whatever the steps of your sermon preparation process may be, however long your allotted time of sermon preparation is, you should have these three elements: read, record, reflect. I mean, if you have a system of preparing sermons that doesn't involve you or require you to read, I think you and I have two very different understanding of what biblical preaching is about, and I don't know what help to be to you. I don't know what that universe is. I hear some preachers say, the Lord just dropped this in my spirit. Well, he doesn't drop the meaning of a Greek word in your spirit. You got to look it up. And he doesn't drop, the geographic location mentioned in the text, what that place was. He doesn't, quote unquote, drop that in your spirit. I mean, generally you have two choices. You've got to look it up, or you're going to make it up. Right? So you need to read. On the other end of that, you need to reflect. You need time to let what you are studying marinate. You need time to use a biblical term, to meditate on what you have studied, on what you've read, on what you've learned. But in the middle of that, and maybe hovering over both of those things, is the recording. I think you should, if you are studying a text or a topic or a theme for the first time, you should, A, do a really good job. And number two, or B, you should take good notes. So I think that one of the strengths of my preaching is that I am a beneficiary of sermon notes that I take week in and week out. In fact, I think I have more sermon study files than I actually have sermon manuscripts. There was a period when I wasn't writing a sermon manuscript, but I was taking very careful notes of what I've read. If I had anything to take back, sometimes a guy my age is asked, if you look back, what would you do differently? One of the things I would do differently is I would go back and redo those seasons in my ministry when I did not take good notes. And that was a stretch. And there's a season of ministry where it is just a black hole. I don't have any record of anything that I was learning, preaching, or teaching to others. It's not that I wasn't preparing, but I was just very impressed with my mind and my memory. And one thing typically fixes that: time. Yeah. Time will fix that. And you need to take, if you're studying a text for the first time, I'll say it again, do a good job and take good notes. So I try. I think one of the strengths of my preaching is that I take pretty comprehensive notes, and so much so that I'm able to, if a word comes up, if a theme comes up, if a cross reference comes up and it lands me in something I've studied before, I am able to go back and retrieve it because I took good notes. So I have a system for it. I know a lot of guys who just simply have a legal pad and just start writing. I have a pretty organized system that I use, and want to just talk to you about some of those documents in my sermon preparation process. The first thing I have is a document, a Word document. I work out of Word, Microsoft Word. I use Apple products, but I never was able to give up Microsoft Word. So I start with with 3 cardstock copies of my typed out sermon text. And I'm making random notes. This may be, I don't know, this may be going back if I'm 4 years later, I may go back to that document, and it might be the least useful of all the documents that I have. But the week in sermon preparation, that document is with me every day, wherever I am. And if I'm meditating, I'm just kind of drawing lines. So it helps me in the pulpit to have a clean Bible, so I don't take notes in my Bible. I need to be able to just look down and see the text, not be distracted by notes in my Bible. So this helps me. I have a document where I have typed out my text, spaces in between. And if I'm thinking about cross references, I put it, if I'm studying words, I'm putting details there. If there's a line, there's a thought about how to illustrate that section, I may put a 2-3 word phrase there. And a lot of times after all of the other notes, I said it might not be helpful to me 2 years from now, but the week of sermon preparation, if I lost all my notes and had that document, I still pretty much have a roadmap for where I am going with this sermon and what my understanding of this text is. So I think you should, in sermon preparation, you should be reading and rereading the text. I read the text casually. I read the text continually. I read the text carefully. And that is happening with pen and highlighters on that Word document. I also have someone who blesses me each week by making a chart of about 6 committee translations on my text that I'm able to consult and review. So it's a chart. I have King James. I have the NAS. I have the NIV. I have the ESV and a couple of others. And they're in a chart form. So I'm able to compare them side by side. I used to use parallel Bibles back in the day. And this is just a version of that for each text with selected translations. So I'm able to kind of scan and see what the major translations are. That document is in my file as well. So I have a text document and I also have a translation document. In my beginning process of observation, I just have, for instance, observations on Psalm 1. And that's how I label it. And I kind of begin each week by just this, a lot of times, sanctified brainstorming. And I'm writing through that document until I have thought myself empty. I may do sentence diagrams there. I may have 3 or 4 potential sermon outlines there. I have words I need to look up, people I need to know, places that I think are emphasized in the text. I'm marking repeated words. Any questions I have about the text, sometimes, in fact, that's how I go through each verse, asking the journalistic questions: who, what, when, where, why, and just kind of marking the answers that I see in those texts. Any cross references that come to mind. If I heard you preach a sermon on that text and I remember your outline, or remember that you read verse 3 that way, I may just say, so and so says verse 3 means, is he right? I'm having my own arguments with the text. This says this here, but that passage says that. How do you correlate those two ideas? I'm putting all my cards on the table with the text. And this is the beginning stage of that process with me. I may do more in that stage at this season of life. I may do some word studies and start including that there. But I'm beginning here, not with generally, I don't want to. This is not reference work, no commentaries, no other resources, just me, an open Bible, one document, and hopefully the help of the Holy Spirit. And I am thinking through that document. Then when I start in earnest reading resources, I open up my page. I open up on my screen, actually, 5 pages. And those 5 pages are notes. Let's just use Psalm 1 as an example text. One will be labeled Notes on Psalm 1. Notes on Psalm 1. Context on Psalm 1. Thirdly, I'm going to have a page called Commentary on Psalm 1. Fourthly, I'm going to have sermon ideas on Psalm 1. And then fifthly, sermon outlines on Psalm 1. So let me just say a little bit about each of those documents. Notes is just anything that I think I need to make a note of to remember later on down the road. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I don't know if it's going to matter or not. This is just a catch-all. Anything that I kind of don't know what else to do with, but I think I need to make a record of that thought. I think I need to remember this. It's just, that's where I'm putting that document. It has no specific meaning, no specific purpose, no specific emphasis. It's just something I think I need to record that may or may not come in handy later down the road. And as I'm studying, as I'm reading, as I'm thinking, as I'm praying, as I'm organizing, there are some things I'm just thinking, hey, I might need to remember that. And I'm just putting that, I'm typing that into that notes page. Context is anything that I'm learning related to the literary context or the historical context. So there are places where I'm reading and there are good summaries of the literary or historical context. I'm putting notes there. If there's any detail about a place that I need to keep a record of, and if it's Psalm 1, I'm doing verse 1, verse 2. I'm listing the verses and I'm typing in notes under the appropriate verse. So if I go back to this sometime later and I need to remember something about verse 3, the tree planted by the streams of water, then I'm able to go right to that verse, and whatever context or historical, in this passage, it would deal with poetry or the poetic imagery of a tree. The streams of the water, whatever historical context, meaning geography, politics, poetry, parallelism, religious assumptions, cultural norms, anything related to the world of the text or the literary, and by that I mean broader context, how this fits in, or anything related to the genre. It's all going there as I'm studying in that context page. Commentary, I do pretty much the same thing. Verse 1, I type out the verse. Verse 2, I type out the verse. So as I'm studying, anything I'm learning about the meaning of the text that I need to keep a record of in my mind. So this might not benefit you, but if it's something that I think, hey, I need to remember that, this helps me understand this text, this idea about the meaning of the text. Here are this text is interpreted 3 different ways, and I kind of need to trace that out and kind of know where those arguments came from and why I chose this argument, that conclusion, interpretation over that one. All of that is going in that commentary document. Sermon ideas is another document that I'm having open, and anything that may have a shot at going in the sermon, any idea, any quote, any reference, any illustration idea that may have a shot at going in the sermon. Most of it will not get there. I don't spend a lot of time deliberating over this, but if I think you got a legitimate shot at going in this sermon, you are going in the sermon ideas page. I mean, I have labeled this exactly what I intend this document to be. Any ideas that I have that may or may not go into the sermon. So, yeah, the sermon outlines document is this is just my quirk. I enjoy the reading and researching and reflecting on the text. Sermon preparation for me is hard work. I hope that it seems easy for me in the pulpit, but sermon preparation for me is hard work. And I struggle each week about how to take what I'm learning from a text and put my arms around it for the pulpit. And I am aided by seeing how guys structured messages. So along the way in my reading, I also listen to messages over the course of the week. And if I'm walking or if I'm traveling or if I am commuting, I'll often listen to messages, several messages each week on my sermon text. And anything I've read and heard that there's a sermon outline, I feel like I'm hedging my bet here because I'm a little embarrassed to just tell you I collect sermon outlines. So along with my other notes, I'm going to have several pages of just sermon outlines that I have picked up along the way. And I'm reviewing them in the course of my sermon preparation. So I think that's like 7 or 8 documents. The text page, the translation page, and the observation document. And then there is the 4 or 5 documents I'm primarily working on when I'm reading and consulting the resources. I handwrite stuff about word studies to myself on documents. So that's another document. I'm writing out things I need to remember about word studies. A lot of times, if I don't, I'm inserting that into the commentary page. I'm putting cross-reference stuff. Usually in that text document, I'm putting cross-references near the phrase or word or clause in the text where it might be useful in the sermon. So after all of those documents, I then produce what I call a sermon skeleton. Hopefully, the sermon skeleton is a 1-page summary of where I'm going with the sermon. It's here that I land on the title. I land on the main idea, the propositional statement, the thesis, the big idea, the sermon in a sentence. What is the doctrinal theme? I put that on here. What's the probing question? Each sermon, I want to have a probing question that the sermon is intended to answer. Transitional statements, particularly the transitional statement from the introduction into the main body, I put there, and then my outline. In my head, over outline, it's kind of structure helps me remember. So what's in this very detailed outline might not be reflected in the sermon. It may or may not, but I'm trying to structure where the sermon is going, and I'm putting that in a document. And I call it the sermon skeleton. Its goal is to be a 1-page summary of the purpose of this sermon and the structure of the sermon. And then I write a sermon manuscript. My sermon manuscripts, I type out, and my goal is that sermon manuscript is about 2,500 words, and it cannot go past 5 pages. So, yeah. So those are my documents. I save all of those documents and then put them in a file that I will label Psalm 1. And then I'm going to put that file in Dropbox in a file called Psalm Study File. So every psalm that I have studied to preach is in that Psalm file, study file in Dropbox. And I have that on all of my devices. So if I am somewhere and need to, I feel like if I was in a jam in a day to write a sermon on Psalm 1 or something like that, or write a Bible study on Psalm 1, I have, maybe outside that initial text document, which would be in the file and I don't often scan, I have all of those other documents in my Dropbox file that I'm able to look up and consult. I also print that file and put it in its file cabinet. So I'm a young dinosaur in that regard. So I have a digital filing system in Dropbox with everything I save there, and everything I save there, I try to put a physical copy. So if I'm here studying, my impulse will not be to go to Dropbox. My impulse will be to go to my file cabinet, pull out that file on Psalm 1, and kind of make notes on documents and what have you. One of the things, the detailed notes in Psalm 1 and keeping them digitally is, if I preached Psalm 1 years ago, but if I decided to preach it again this year, and I decided, hey, since last time I preached this, these, like the Christopher Ash commentary on Psalms has come out, and it wasn't available when I studied. But if I was to go back and preach Psalm 1, I would want to read that Christopher Ash commentary on Psalms, and I could basically just keep doing what I was doing in the original studies. If there's something I learned that I want to remember, I can include that in the document, so it expands the documents. But I still have everything in place. So, yeah, that's my sermon document system. How do you record what you are learning in your sermon preparation? Not only what is your process of recording, do you have any process of filing what you are learning? Remember the principle. If you're studying a text for the first time, you should take good notes. You should do a good job, I should say. That's first and foremost. Do a good job and take good notes. Yeah. So what's your process? What do you think about this process? You got any questions about it? Comments on it? I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at hbcharlesjr.com. You'll find show notes for this episode, as well as other episodes of the On Preaching podcast. Likewise, there'll be sermon manuscripts there, and articles that I've written, and other material that might be a helpful part for your own private devotions, study of scripture, or sermon preparation. And also reach me on social media. I hang out sometimes on X, Instagram, and Facebook. My handle is HB Charles Jr. on all of those spaces. You can look me up there. And if you're listening to the podcast, friends, please subscribe to the On Preaching podcast. By subscribing on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, you'll get an automatic download of each new episode of the podcast. And would you be so kind as to like, rate, or comment on the podcast on whatever platform you use? That will help others find this material in the growing ecosystem of podcasts that are being produced. And I would consider it a personal favor as well. Friends, thank you for your feedback on the podcast. As I bump into you here and there, I think people hear my preaching. And after that, the most common piece of feedback I get is from those of you who listen to this podcast. It started out as a habit to me, but by God's kindness, it has been a help to other preachers along the way. And I'm grateful for your encouragement. Stay the course. Pray that I'll do the same. And join me for the next episode of the On Preaching podcast. Friends, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is also a video element now to this podcast. You can still find us in all of the typical podcast platforms that you are accustomed to, but also the video of this podcast is also available at our YouTube site. You can look it up by searching for Cutting It Straight. Not only will you find episodes of this podcast on that YouTube page, you'll also find messages that I preach from my pulpit here in Jacksonville at the Shiloh.Church, and messages from the Cutting It Straight Expository Preaching Conference, and other material that might be a help blessing, or encouragement. So how about you not only search for this podcast there, but that you subscribe and like that Cutting It Straight page so that others will find it and that we'll be able to be a blessing and benefit to others through this ministry. Thanks in advance. I'm really excited that the second issue of the new Cutting It Straight magazine is now available. The emphasis of this particular issue is on pastoral preaching, and there are solid contributions by faithful men, as well as tools to help you in your own sermon preparation. This is a new step of faith that we are taking to serve pastors, preachers, and teachers to help you in your handling of the word and your proclamation of the truth. Let me invite you to subscribe to the new Cutting It Straight magazine. You can do so at cismag.org. Again, that's cismag.org. I hope that you'll subscribe and tell a friend. Thanks in advance for your partnership in the gospel.
You've been listening to the On Preaching Podcast. For more information or resources, or to contact me, go to www.hbcharlesjr.com.